Hi, Tara Kiesling here with Together We Will. We're here with David Brenner, candidate for Cincinnati School Board. Together We Will is a local political organization where we have been interviewing local candidates who are running for office. So you can get a chance to talk to them, get a chance to know them, ask them questions live. The way that we'll be running this interview is that if you have any question, just click on the video and in the comment section add a question, and I will ask David live whatever that question may be. We do have a couple rules for that. So if you're also running for Cincinnati School Board or a municipal judge, or if you're running for just Cincinnati School Board, please don't ask any questions of the candidate. At some point you may be interviewed as well, and we would ask that candidates kind of don't ask each other questions. In the future, look for more Q&As. We'll have more Cincinnati School Board, and we'll also have municipal judge live interviews coming up. If you have any friends who are interested in something like this or would be interested in asking questions, feel free to connect them with us. Again, this is Together We Will, and I'm here with Dawn from Cincinnati State. She is our interpreter today. She has donated her time, and she's amazing, and I will try and speak slower for Dawn. If you are interested in more, like I said, interviews like this, feel free to like the Together We Will page on Facebook, or you can follow us on Twitter at TWWSWOH. I think we're trying to connect with everybody right now. We have multiple groups coming together. And when I get the thumbs up, I'll give you an intro of David. Okay. Until I get the thumbs up, though, David has a website. It's Better with Brenner. Again, he's running for Cincinnati School Board. That covers, obviously, Cincinnati proper, and then a few other areas around Cincinnati, Amberley Village, a small portion of Green Township, a few other places.
Part of Delhi. Amberley Village, Fairfax, did I say Delhi? Yep. Let's see, part of Deer Park, and Gulf Manor, and there's one I'm forgetting. I apologize to anybody in the area that I forgot.
Well, if you're living in Cincinnati and you're voting for Cincinnati School Board, this is the video for you. If you're living in one of those areas, this is also the video for you, because this election will affect you and potentially your kids, or even just your life, because education matters to everybody. Are we ready? Ready? Okay. So again, David Brenner is running for Cincinnati School Board. He's a lifelong Cincinnati citizen. He attended Cincinnati Public Schools, Old Roselawn Elementary and Hyde Park Elementary. He graduated from Walnut Hills High. He's a member of the Junior Engineering Technology Society Chess Club Olympics of the Mind team. That was all in high school, right?
That was all in high school. I was a member of those groups. Yep.
Very well-rounded. Has had a career in information technology and has worked in a diverse range of companies, and I'll let you kind of go into those if you'd like. And then he's chose actually to live in the city of Cincinnati for the Cincinnati public school system, which is awesome. People who grew up here should come back, and they should have kids here and send those kids to public school. You also work on the PTO, which is the Parent-Teacher Organization, and you're the chair of the local school decision-making committee.
Yes.
So I'm going to pass it over to you if there's anything that I missed or anything that you want to go into further.
So, like I said, like Chair said, my name is David Brenner. I've lived in Cincinnati my whole life. I love this city. I was formed by my experiences in Cincinnati Public Schools. I love the school district. My wife and I had a choice of many places to live, and we chose Cincinnati to build our family because of the school system. Since we've joined the Cincinnati Public School family as parents, we've been very involved from camping out to get our oldest into Sans Montessori. We've been very involved in the local PTO. My wife and I have both held a number of positions with the PTO, and I am the current chair of the LSDMC for Sans Montessori.
So we'll go ahead and get started with a couple of just general questions. Why do you want to be on the school board?
as I've gone through my career, I've tried to figure out how I can give back and make the world a better place. And the idea of running for office has come up a couple of times. And one of the things that I think I want to bring to the board is my experience in business. I see the board makeup itself is generally focused from one demographic. And I think that there are certain skills lacking there that I think apply from a business standpoint. I think the board deserves a diversity of opinions, because opinions coming from multiple directions are going to come up with better solutions.
What do you see as the top challenges facing the district, and what role will you take when it comes to resolving those issues?
Yeah. I think the first issue that's probably front of many people's minds is the levy that was passed last year funding the preschool promise. Making sure that the district is good stewards of those dollars, and we will probably get into that later in our questions, but making sure that the public understands how those dollars are being spent, making sure that they are being spent wisely. The number of students in the district is growing rapidly. As more families move into the district, as young people start building families in the district, the schools have grown at a greater rate than anybody expected. So capacity within the schools is going to be a challenge. I think also the magnet programs have been very successful, more successful, I think, than anybody anticipated, and that also leads to our capacity issues. And then we also have challenges with communicating with families and communities and students, and making sure that more than just the administration is involved in decision making for the district.
So that kind of leads into another question that a lot of people might be wondering. As a member of the Board of Education, the school board, what roles and responsibilities do you have, or would you have if you were elected into that position?
Yeah, so the Board of Education is, I liken it to the Board of Directors for a corporation. The board isn't responsible for day-to-day operations. They're more responsible for approving the budget, hiring a new superintendent, acting in an advisory and policy-making board, not the day-to-day running of individual schools. That's left up to the superintendent and their staff. So as a board member, it is important to collaborate with the other members of the board, with the district, and with the families and students and community members to make sure that everybody is represented at the table.
Number one interview question, your success story. So what was the biggest change or improvement you initiated in a previous position, and what specific difficulties did you face? And this is a big question. So what steps did you take to resolve these difficulties? If you'd like me to, if you want to answer part of it and then ask me to repeat some of it, I will.
No, so I worked for Kroger for 7 years, and my role there was as an enterprise architect. And what that is it's looking at all of the systems and processes that are in the corporation, the needs of the business, the needs of the consumer, and understanding how all those pieces fit together, and identifying where we have gaps in capability, where we're not serving our customers' needs appropriately, and where we have more than one thing doing the same thing, right? So one of my first roles at Kroger was looking at everything that went into the store environment. And it was, you look at what's going on in the deli, you look at what's going on the front end with the cash registers, you look at how things are stocked, how things are staffed. And my initial task was to understand everything that went on in the store environment and work with all of the stakeholders on a 3 to 5 year plan. That was something that hadn't been done in a comprehensive way before. So it involved understanding all of the technology in the store, all of the different business processes in the store, who the stakeholders were, and interviewing them individually and then working with them as a group to come up with a comprehensive plan. Because it hadn't been done before, there was a lot of hesitance to expose what they were doing, because they didn't want to talk about was going wrong with the process. They only wanted to talk about what was going right with the process. So in order to address that, you have to start to build trust, to show people that you're not there to drag them over the coals, that you're there to understand what they're doing right, understanding what their challenges are, and working together to come up with a good solution. And so that's the type of thing that I want to be able to bring to the board, is to understand really what the problems are and why those problems exist, instead of coming in and assuming that I know everything that's going on, that I know everybody's difficulties. Let's understand why we have the challenge and what's possible, and then move on from there.
That kind of leads into the next question, which you've been touching at and you'll probably touch at more in this interview, but what are your top priorities and why are those your top priorities? So
my number one top priority is making sure that we are more collaborative with the parent and student communities. As a parent in the district, I find that I'm unaware of many things that are happening within the district. There's, I think, a feeling that there's lots of communication going out to families, but it's not being received, it's not arriving. So working to make sure that that communication is happening. I think the next priority is making sure that we're serving the needs of all of our students, whether they're in a magnet program, whether they're in a high school, whether they're in a neighborhood school. We've put a lot of focus on the magnet programs, but we are not focusing as much on the neighborhood schools. And we can talk about specifics about that later. I think the last one is just with the growth of the district and the current administration's desire to move vouchers, which would take money out of the school district, addressing all of the financial concerns that the district is going to face moving forward.
This is going a little bit off script, but I think it might be an important distinction, especially for someone who doesn't have kids in the district currently. So what are the differences between the types of schools that we have right now in the Cincinnati School District?
Sure. So you have the traditional neighborhood schools. So you have a school in a neighborhood, and then there's an area around that school where you're assigned to go to that school. If you do nothing else, you are automatically enrolled in that school, right? I mean, you have to sign up, but that's your default option. The next is the magnet programs for elementary schools. And some examples of that are the Montessori programs, the Paideia program, Fairview, the German language school. Those are the schools that you hear about in the newspaper or on the TV all the time, where people were camping out in order to get into those schools. Those are the schools that are now addressed with the lottery system. So if there are more students wanting to go into a specific grade than there are spots available, then students are prioritized based on a number of criteria in a policy, and they're basically drawn at random based on those priorities to get those slots. Then we have our high school programs, which we used to have neighborhood high schools and magnet high schools, and now with open enrollment, the admission into the different high school programs is open to the entire district. So we have the Montessori high schools, we have something like Taft, which focuses on information technology. You have different college prep programs, etc.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up.
Yep.
So speaking of collaboration, which is pointing at something earlier,
Yes.
How would you successfully work with the unions? Is there anything you'd like to change about how CPS works with unions?
Well, I think how I would work with the unions is first, again, back to building trust with the union representatives, right? I think that there is often, with business, an adversarial relationship between the administration and the union. And I don't think that that has to be the case. From everything I've observed, that is not the case between the district and the teachers union. I would want to continue the good work that's going on there, and make sure that we are working in a collaborative way to meet the needs of both the teachers and fundamentally the students, as we want. I mean, our primary purpose for being here is to educate our children.
Right. What tools or methods will you use to ensure due diligence with the hiring process?
So in my career, I've been involved in hiring folks that report to me and others that do not report to me. And what I generally look for in a candidate is not, you have to look at their qualifications to begin with. But that's only part of the problem, right? So if you don't meet the qualifications, then you're out as a candidate, period. But then the next part is, how would you work as a member of the team, right? Because it's not a bunch of individuals out there working on their own. People have to mesh as a team. So if you have a specific skill gap in the team that you're working on, you need to figure out how you fill that. So for example, if you've got 10 people with very strong personalities that all want to do things their own way, very little tends to get done, right? You have to have people coming at things from different perspectives with different strengths. You want some people that are very long-range thinkers. You need some folks that are focused on day-to-day operations, etc. So what I look for is what are my gaps and where do I need more capability, and move on from there.
If you're just joining us, this is David Brenner, candidate for Cincinnati School Board. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, just click on the video and add your question to the comment section. We have, they're being fed to me, so I will see them on my screen as soon as you ask them. Moving on to the next question.
Absolutely.
How would you communicate with all stakeholders?
Well, I think there's an opportunity right now in the district. They are going to be looking for a new communications director. So I think the first order of business is to understand what the new communications director's priorities are for what their expertise in how to communicate with our stakeholders. I think a few things that would make sense is written communication, email communication, the voice messages out to the parents in the community I think are working well. I would also make sure that we're covering social media, the newspaper, the TV news, radio, etc., and making sure that when we're having open house sessions and meetings with the community, that we're, one, giving sufficient notice that those meetings are happening, two, making sure that the purpose of those meetings is very clear, and three, making sure that those occur at times when the majority of families can make it. Right? Not everybody can make a meeting that's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon if you have a day job. If you work second shift, 7 o'clock in the evening doesn't necessarily work. Parents are overwhelmed with extracurricular activities and making sure that their students get to soccer practice or basketball practice or band practice or any one of a number of things that take up people's time. So we need to make sure that we're covering making it accessible to the most number of people.
Speaking of accessibility, with such a large spectrum of learning abilities from gifted and talented to students with individualized education programs, what will you do to ensure all children in the district get the services they need?
Sure. Well, let me be upfront about this. Background in education, and so I'm not going to pretend to know what the best way to provide those services to students are. So from my perspective, I think we need to, again, you will notice the theme here, build a collaborative group representing all the stakeholders and the experts. We should be using data-driven decision-making and using the expertise of those in the field to understand what do we need to do, and then we can figure out how we would fund it. And there's going to be a balance there between what we can afford to do and what we need to do, and we have to find a middle ground there.
Collaboration and communication, the two good C's.
Yes, exactly.
What and where is the lowest student-to-teacher ratio in CPS, and what and where is the highest? And what will you do to lower the student-to-teacher ratio in schools where it's too high?
Yeah. That information was amazingly difficult to find. So based on the best information that I was able to gather, going from multiple sources and trying to pull that together, what I found was that the highest student-to-teacher ratio in the district is 36.5, and that's at virtual high school. Now, if we take that out of the mix, the next highest is Frederick Douglass at just over 30 students per teacher. The lowest is just about 16 at Aiken High School. Now, the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers says that for 7 to 12, about 30 is the limit for the classroom. 4 to 6, it's around 28 students. And then for K through 3, it's between 18 and 25, depending on what type of program that you're in. So I think the high student to teacher ratio really reflects a larger problem. I think just with increasing class size, with increasing student population, we need to make sure that we are building a pipeline of teachers coming out of school to enter the district. From different conversations I've had with the various stakeholders, we are not adequately recruiting teachers, and we are not recruiting them soon enough. So one of the things that I would want to work with the new superintendent on is figuring out how we build that pipeline to get teachers into the district. We also need to make sure that we're supporting the teachers to retain them in the district. And then the last piece that we have, and absolutely not the least, is that our teacher population is aging, so we are going to run into a problem like many other businesses where you have people retiring, and we need to make sure that we have people, one, learning from those teachers' experience, and two, making sure that we're filling those spots.
Yeah, to avoid a problem later.
Absolutely, to avoid a problem later. Or not make the problem we had worse.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So some of us have seen firsthand the damage that an unfair
dress code?
That an unfair dress code can have on girls' self-esteem. What would you do to equalize the gender situation that's going on in schools?
Yeah. So dress code is an interesting topic, and as you will no doubt guess, I'm going to again look to collaborate with students, with parents, with teachers, with administrators to understand what is an appropriate dress code for our students. That is a very fraught topic. There is a lot of passion around that. We want to allow our students to express themselves. But I think we can all agree that there are some lines that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to dress in a learning environment. That should absolutely be gender neutral, right? Both young men and young women can cross a line, right? And I think it's unfortunate that we tend to focus on how do we constrain how girls are dressing versus how boys are dressing. And so, again, I would want to get students' input as to what they think is appropriate. I would want to get parents' input as to what they think is appropriate. And I would want to get the administration and the teachers involved to understand what they think is appropriate, and then come to a consensus. And that could be at a school level, because different communities have different ideas on what is appropriate, right? The school culture and how everybody interacts should reflect that.
Right, and in compliance too, so if they're not agreeing, they're just not going to do it.
Absolutely.
So.
But if you have collaboration and input, there's a greater chance you're going to buy into whatever policy is there, and everybody helps enforce it.
Yes. Yeah. Do you support the use of school uniforms? Why or why not?
And much like the dress code, the students and the parents and the administration want to build an environment where uniforms are the norm. I fully support that from a policy standpoint. If a school environment doesn't want a uniform, then I'm okay with that as well. Different people do better in different environments, right? There's a long history of schools having uniforms, and it works well. There's a long history of schools not having dress code or uniforms, and they do well. So I would community to determine whether that's the right thing or not.
So maybe this is more of a question for someone that would do the day-to-day policing of schools or whatever,
Sure.
whatever kind of language you want to use. How do you have policies like that? Does the school board make overarching policies? How do you make the policies so what they want?
So there are policies that are district-wide, right? And I believe that you can craft a policy that allowed latitude for local decision-making. There are certain policies that are, this is what we're doing, period, no questions asked. Some latitude for principals and PTOs and students to make their own cultural norms.
Yeah. What solution do you propose for dealing with bullying beyond a no tolerance policy? And how should the school board and schools handle situations in which bullying of all kinds, including physical, emotional, online, occurs?
Yeah, this is a hot topic lately,
Yes.
and I think bullying has always been around. It seems to be worse now, and I'm not sure how much of that is perception based on how much more information that we have, and how much of that is it's become less socially acceptable to bully students. I think that it's unwise to put all of the burden on the school to deal with the bullying problem. It's really a larger issue that goes back to home environment, community environment, different experiences that children have. I would want to make sure that we were involving our psychological and social support staff to understand why we have bullying, and try and address the root cause issue instead of addressing symptoms. Now, as far as things go when bullying actually does occur, I think first thing we need to do is make sure that at a cultural level within the school that bullying is unacceptable, right? The student or the school administration can't have eyes on every student all the time, 24 hours a day. It just can't happen. So we need to make sure that the students look out for each other, right? And make it so there is no stigma with reporting bullying, right? I know when I was a kid that, if you were getting bullied, often it was worse when you reported something. So we need to make sure that that is not the case. As far as addressing punishments or corrective action, I think that comes at a case-by-case basis, and there's no hard and fast rule as to what you do. I absolutely think there is a zero tolerance policy there. But things that happen outside the school, it's difficult for the school to manage that. I'll stop rambling now.
No, you're fine. It's a community effort.
Absolutely.
Whatever happens in one building has to be across the board reinforced wherever you are.
Absolutely.
This is a question that kind of goes along those lines as well. How will you handle sexual harassment, sexual assault issues in schools among students and teachers? And how do privacy concerns fit into your approach?
Yeah.
These are some tough questions.
They are. And, school administration absolutely needs to make it clear that that is unacceptable, right? And this very quickly gets into an area where there are legal ramifications. So we need to understand where the line is for when there's mandatory reporting, when law enforcement needs to get involved. Again, we need to make sure that there's an environment where there is not a fear of reprisal for reporting something. Now, on the same token, we need to make sure that we deal with all of the facts in a situation, in making sure that both the accuser and the accused's rights are respected until we know everything that happened, right? So, yeah, I mean, we need to make sure that everybody has a safe environment to be educated in. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard. It's really unfortunate that is something that we have to deal with, right? I mean, it's an unfortunate when anybody is assaulted, and we need to make sure that we're being supportive and getting to the bottom of how did this happen, why did this happen, and often leave it up to the courts to figure out how to punish those that have done something, and then providing the support to victims to make sure that they're getting the help that they need to deal with the situation.
So how will you handle future challenges to gender-based bathroom issues?
Frankly, I don't understand why it's an issue, right? In the research that I've done, I am unaware of any situation where somebody with, that is portraying their gender identity in order to make anybody else uncomfortable, right? This is who they are. And people should be able to use whatever bathroom they need to based on their gender identity. I don't know that we want to go to the extreme of having single gender bathrooms and everybody uses the same bathroom, because I think that would make all the students uncomfortable, right? But I mean, as the internet memes show, I have a unisex bathroom in my home, right? So,
right.
Everybody's got to do their business where they're comfortable.
So moving on to sex ed related questions.
Yeah.
Ohio has no model curriculum for sex education, which leaves the decisions up to local districts. Mm-hmm. Comprehensive curricula are considered to be the most medically accurate and age-appropriate form of sex education. Yeah. Abstinence-only programs have been proven to be ineffective or even harmful. What will you do to ensure our teens get the best sex education public schools can provide?
This one's easy. I would absolutely policy that states that we will use evidence-based means to come up with all of our curricula, sex ed, science, math, history, that we will look at what does the data and the evidence and the facts support, right? If abstinence-only education was the best means of providing education to our children and the data supported that, I'd be all for it. But the evidence doesn't support that. So making sure that our children are educated, informed, know what means of contraception and prevention of sexually transmitted diseases are is critically important. And yeah, that's all I have.
Moving on to the budget. What will you do to ensure successful collaboration on budget creation and adherence? And is there anything you'd like to change about the current budget allocations?
Yeah. So again, back to collaboration, I would make sure that all the stakeholders have their needs with the budget represented. If we start there as table stakes, I think that the district has and is creating a problem with our budget. We've invested many dollars into our magnet programs. We've invested a lot of dollars into the programs within our high schools. To some extent, we've neglected our neighborhood schools. The enrollment numbers based on capacity of the schools show this. Our magnet programs are at or over capacity. Our neighborhood schools, some of them are as low as 50% enrollment.
Wow.
Right. So, you know, if you were able to take all of the students and spread them out across all of the school buildings, you would be at about 85% capacity. Now, a problem that we've got is, I'm going to use the Montessori schools as an example. We have 5 elementary schools that provide Montessori education. We have 2 high schools that provide Montessori education. I'm going to refer to my notes here so I get the numbers right.
Okay.
So for an incoming 7th grade year, you can take about 225 students based on our current capacity in our high schools. Our 6th grade class this past year was almost 340 students. So we don't have enough spots for those students to go. Kindergarten in those same schools is about 550 students. So we're going to be at half capacity. So one of the things we need to deal with is, where do we come up with the extra capacity for our students? I think, to get back to the earlier question with budget, we've created a situation where students are traveling far distances from their homes to go to magnet programs that are perceived to be better. We need to, well, the unintended side effect of that is it drives up our busing costs dramatically. With the Vision 2020 phase that's going in next year, I believe that they anticipate the busing costs are going to go up between $7 and $8 million next year. That's a significant portion of our budget. So by neglecting our neighborhood schools and focusing only on magnets, we've dramatically driven our busing costs up. So if we can invest in our neighborhood schools and get people to come back to those schools, 1, it addresses part of our capacity issue. 2, it reduces our busing costs, and those dollars can then be spent on more classroom support. Aside from that, we need to figure out, where are we going to get more capacity, right? If I look at across the board this year's graduating senior class and the kindergarten class that just came in, we are at about 2,000 graduating seniors this year. We've got 3,100 kindergarten students. We have to make up that gap somewhere, and the only way we're going to do that in a cost-effective way is by making more neighborhood schools and making them desirable.
A good time to jump in and say, if anybody watching has any questions, feel free to ask them, and I will read them right to David Brenner, candidate for Cincinnati School Board. Any question whatsoever. As someone who doesn't have kids in the district, I don't have kids at all, it's good to know about. It's something that I want to be informed about, because I'm voting, and knowing how the system works is helpful for everybody, I think. So next question, and
absolutely.
budget related.
Yeah.
This has a background to it, so I'm going to read the question, read the background, and then read the question again, because the background is a little wordy.
Sure.
But it'll make sense once I read the question.
Absolutely.
So, what will you do to ensure that funds earmarked for certain students and programs actually go to those students and programs? And the background of this question is, it has been reported that schools get extra money for students who qualify for gifted services. However, most people do not realize that the school doesn't have to use that money toward gifted services. CPS schools don't always put that money towards gifted programs. They sometimes put it towards security and intervention services. So again, the question is, what will you do to ensure that funds earmarked for certain students and programs actually go to those students and programs?
Sure. First off, I'd like to broaden that to go beyond just gifted services, but to all services where there's an earmark. First off, because I don't understand all the background of where the question's coming from. First, I would want to ensure that there is a problem with how the funds are being allocated, right? It doesn't make sense to come up with a policy to address something that isn't actually happening. So the first thing would be to understand, okay, what is the actual situation on the ground? The next thing I would do is make it very clear in our policies and in our budget where those funds are supposed to go and making sure that they do go there. Again, in my research, I've noticed that there is a broad disparity between the dollars that each student is given at each school and how much per student goes into classroom support. It was actually quite startling how big a difference there is between one school and another school with how many dollars are going to each student. Well, and to support each student. The students don't actually get the money. Some of those situations I understand, right? But others, I'm not sure why there is that discrepancy there. But ensuring that our budget reflects what is supposed to happen with those dollars as good stewards of the taxpayers' money, I mean, it starts there, right? So, yeah. And if we find a situation where we as a district are not adhering to those policies, or we have people in positions of authority spending dollars in ways that they shouldn't, then we would have some sort of action to educate, this is what you should be doing, and then go from there.
Well, speaking of investment on students,
Yeah.
What kinds of job training are being offered by CPS, and what kinds of training should be offered? Over time, how will CPS assess what job training needs to be addressed?
Yeah. So I think the district is doing a number of wonderful things with the specialties within the individual high schools, right? We're getting students skills in information technology and STEM, which are vital to our economy. We have programs like the Junior ROTC for students that want to pursue a career in the military. We have creative arts programs for students that want to pursue that. I think as to what things that we should provide in the future, I think we need to reach out to the community to find out what we aren't offering that is desired, as opposed to, as a board, saying, oh, well, this sounds interesting, let's do this, when there really is no interest in doing that. Now, along those lines, I think something that we're doing, again, that I think is well-intentioned but has unintended side effects, is we're pushing those types of specialty programs down into the elementary schools. And I don't know about you, but when I was in second or third grade, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I'm not sure that differentiating programs for children that young, when they're still getting their baseline of knowledge, is appropriate. And I would want to look at that further. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the district's doing a lot of great things to make sure that our students come out of school with either the background necessary to move on to college or to move directly into a career if they decide that college isn't for them. Yeah.
So we have a question from the audience.
Sure.
Here. Are there any specific policies that you'd like to introduce or champion on school board?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of them that is near and dear to my heart is the lottery. Camping out was inherently unfair, and not everybody was able to take off a long weekend, which is what we had to do, or up to 2 weeks to get their student into school, right? People work, right? And not everybody had the opportunity to be able to do something like that. So I think putting a lottery in place makes sense. But I think the way that it's been implemented is troubled, and I think the way we've implemented it is actually driving people out of the district. Anecdotally, from Sands, I know of a couple families that applied to get into Clark and were unable to get in, and as a result they're leaving the district because their alternative was to travel from Mount Washington all the way across the city to Gamble. And while Gamble's a great school, parents don't want their children on the bus for over an hour a day each way, far away from their support systems. And so we're driving people out of the district. So one of the first things that we're going to do is work with the board to recraft that policy to improve what's there. I think along those same lines is making sure that we are supporting our neighborhood schools to reduce some of that strain on the magnet programs. And I'm not suggesting that we turn every neighborhood school into a magnet, because back to our earlier conversation about busing costs, etc. But we need to make sure that the neighborhood schools are giving the students a good education, and that parents feel that their students are getting a good education. Because I think kids are getting great educations in all of our schools. I think there's a perception problem. We only focus on the negative things that are happening. So again, along those lines, I would want to make sure that we are working with our new communications director to get that message out there about all the good things that are happening in the school and not just focus on the negative.
Linking back to the types of schools that we have, do you believe public funds should go to charter schools?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I understand the argument that I want to be able to take my tax dollars and I'm going to conflate charter schools and vouchers, but I feel the same way about both. As far as charter schools go, you're taking public dollars, you're putting them to a private entity. There's very little accountability, very little oversight of those funds. The schools don't have to take all of the students. They can cherry pick who they take, and the students that they don't want go back to the public schools. Just with the ruling that came down last week, and the state board said that one of the charter schools in Columbus was basically lying about student attendance and defrauded the state and the taxpayers to the tune of $60 million. Right? That is not an uncommon experience. You can always find a shining star in any population. But in general, I believe the data demonstrates that charter schools don't work. So no, public funds shouldn't go there. And as far as vouchers go, there is an attractive idea that I'm paying taxes, I should be able to take my tax dollars where my student goes. Going to a private school is a choice. We all make choices, right? When I was single, without children, and a homeowner, I didn't get to say, well, I'm not using the public schools, so I should be able to take my tax dollars and do something else with them. That's not the way that works, right? The public schools are an investment in everybody's future, not just the students, but our society as a whole, right? We've made the strides we did in the 20th century because of our public education system. And so we all reap the benefits. We all need to.
Speaking, this is about the current administration, Trump and DeVos. What are your thoughts on how the current administration's policies could affect schools locally?
There's already plans in the works at the state level to increase and expand the use of vouchers in Ohio. I think that is largely driven by people that agree with the current administration. If everything that has been said and written about comes to pass, there's going to be a greater drive from the federal level to support voucher programs by tying dollars to supporting those programs. So I think that is a big problem with just from our district's standpoint, is you're going to have people leaving the district to use vouchers, which again have been shown to not be good for the students, and that will make our budget problems worse. Back to the communications, we need to have a full-on marketing campaign, to let people know the public schools are often the best option for our students, and that they should desire to stay within the Cincinnati public school family rather than leave, right? We want them to believe, and it actually to be true, that they're going to get as good or better an education with Cincinnati public schools as they would going to a private school or a charter.
We have a follow-up question from the audience. Sure. On charter schools.
Yep.
So, do public dollars currently go to charter schools in Cincinnati? And if so, how should this be addressed?
Yes, they do, and I believe that is legally mandated. So how we address that is to work with our contacts with the State Board of Education and within the State House to adjust the laws to deal with that, right? I mean, if the law says that we support a charter school, then we have to adhere to the law. What we need to do is change the laws so we can.
That was a good question, and if any of you have any other questions from the audience, now is the time to send them in. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up a couple more questions, and then we'll be saying goodnight.
Okay.
So, what can we do locally to help Cincinnati public schools and ensure that we teach all, and make sure that we teach all, and that funding is distributed equitably?
First, as a community, we need to support our school system, right? People need to get more involved, both with their local PTOs. Community participants need to come in. As far as making sure that there is equity or an equitable chance for an education for all of our students, I think I've covered a lot of this. It's making sure that the students have good options, right? That they have the support they need within the school. And again, I am going to lean on the experts in the field to help define policy that addresses that specifically. I think what I want to bring to the board is collaboration and facilitating that collaboration versus trying to make all of the decisions myself or with the other board members. We need to engage everybody to find out what's the best idea out there, right? You've got 7 people on the board. They are only going to have a certain set of experiences. Everybody's going to have a different idea, and you're going to find nuggets of inspiration in lots of different places. And if you don't go look for it, you're not going to find it, right? And the challenge is we only have so many dollars to deal with, and I think if we're not showing appropriate results and we are not engaging the community, we are in a real danger of having one of our school levies fail. And that would be disastrous to the district. And so by making sure that we're all engaged and showing that the board and the administration is being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars is probably the best thing that we can do to make sure that there's that opportunity across the board.
So we're here with David Brenner, candidate for Cincinnati School Board. His website is Better with Brenner, BRENNER. His Facebook is Brenner for School Board. So in conclusion, do you have anything that you want the audience to know?
Yeah, I'm not the typical candidate for school board. I'm not an educator. I have not worked in the schools, but I have a deep love for our school district. I have 4 children that are in the district, and many if not most of the decisions that I make in my life are specifically to make their lives better. And I want to make sure that we are doing the best for all of our children. And so, you know, I'm not doing this for the money, right? The school board is a difficult, time-consuming, thankless job that effectively gets zero pay. And so I'm doing this specifically because I want to make the world a better place, not because I have some ulterior motive, not because you know, I'm looking for power. I'm looking to make things better in a way that I believe I can. And hopefully this forum has helped, you know, express what my qualifications are, what I want to do. I hope it comes across that I do care about all of the students in our school district, and hopefully I can earn your vote. Please check out my website. More information about kind of where I stand on things is there. Please reach out via email. I will be out at many parades and community events. Come up and talk to me. I would love to hear everybody's ideas about what we need to do to change the district, because I'm your representative on the board. It's not about me, it's about our district.
Thank you, David, and thank you again to Dawn with Cincinnati State, our wonderful interpreter.
Thanks.
Thank you all.